This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this talk we're going to discuss Aesop's fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. The frog who wished to be as big as an ox. Let's read through the fable together, and then we'll consider the characters, the moral of the fable, and how this fable might apply in our own lives. The fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. An ox, grazing in a meadow, chanced to set his foot on a young frog and crushed him to death. His brothers and sisters, who were playing near, at once ran to tell their mother what had happened. "The monster that did it, mother, was such a size," said they. The mother, who was a vain old thing, thought that she could easily make herself as large. "Was it as big as this?" she asked, blowing and puffing herself out. "Oh, much bigger than that," replied the young frogs. "As this, then?" cried she, puffing and blowing again with all her might. "Nay, mother," said they, "if you were to try till you burst yourself, you would never be so big." The silly old frog tried to puff herself out still more, and burst herself indeed. This is the fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. Now remember, any time you read one of Aesop's fables, to pay attention to the details provided in the story. Aesop was a wise man, and his fables will not include any details that are not necessary. We should also remember that there may be a number of lessons, moral lessons, in each fable, and we can draw these lessons out by meditating on the details of the fable. Now, when we consider the characters of the fable, we have an ox and some frogs. We read that the ox, a very large animal, is grazing in a pasture. That's what an ox is supposed to be doing. The ox is out in a pasture, and though it be a very large animal, it's out in a pasture, away by itself, and its size poses no threat or danger to anyone. In fact, oxen are very calm animals that are easily handled by men. But they're very large, and their strength is very great. The ox in this fable is doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. He's out in a pasture, grazing, eating grass. The young frogs, however, we read, are playing nearby. And this is where the trouble begins. The frogs have no business being out in the middle of a pasture, and they're out there simply playing on the ground near an ox. So these frogs create their own trouble. They're not where they should be, and they're not doing anything that they need to do. They're playing out in a pasture where the oxen are grazing. And what happens? The ox, not paying attention to any frogs, but just going about looking for grass and eating with his head down, accidentally, it says by chance, steps upon one of these young frogs and kills it. Again, the ox did nothing wrong. The frogs should be nowhere near the ox out in the pasture. And so the young frogs run back to their mother and tell her what happened. Now, for us to understand the fable, we need to pay attention, like I said, to the details that Aesop provides. And what does Aesop tell us about the mother? He says that she is a vain old thing. So Aesop wants us to see that this mother frog is a foolish person, a foolish character in this story, this vain old thing. And so the young frogs tell the mother what happened, that their brother was crushed by a great big ox out in the pasture where they were playing. The mother doesn't grieve for the dead frog. She doesn't tell the young frogs that they shouldn't be playing out by the oxen. But being silly or vain, she decides to try and show that she can imitate the ox. And so she puffs herself out to try to make herself appear large. And the young frogs say, "No, you're not even close. This animal was huge." And so the mother puffs herself out harder, and they say, "No, you're not even close. This animal was huge." And the young frogs warn the mother that she shouldn't continue to puff herself out like that because she might burst. And yet this vain old thing puffs herself out some more and ultimately bursts. And this is the fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. And this is a strange fable. I admit that this is a difficult fable because it just seems so ridiculous. But there's a few things that I think we can draw from it by reflection. First of all, we saw that the frogs put themselves into the way of danger by being idle and playing in a place where they shouldn't be playing. And so we can draw from this fable one moral lesson, which is to not enter into circumstances that put us in danger. And this is very common when children play, because children, as you know, get wrapped up with a game or with the activity, and they are only thinking about how they can have fun or how they can entertain themselves, and they cease to even pay attention to what's going on. We see this with kids playing in the street. When I was a kid, we used to play in the street a lot. We'd play basketball and kickball and wiffle ball and ride bikes, always playing in the street. And I once had a friend get hit by a car because he hopped on a bike and drove down the driveway out into the street without even looking to see if any cars were coming. And we can see that kids playing like this are like these young frogs playing in the pasture and ignoring the fact that there are giant oxen walking around. So it's a warning about not being circumspect. That means not looking around and paying attention to what's going on. You know, children are taught that anytime you go out into the street or cross the street, you should look both ways before crossing the street. We used to be taught to look left, then right, then left again before going into the street. So we can see a lesson like that about being careful taught in this fable. But what about this mother frog? Obviously, she's the main character of this fable. We can see that from the title, the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. Aesop tells us that she's a vain old thing. She's vain, she's silly or foolish. She's trying to show that she can be as big as an ox, which makes no sense. And ultimately she causes herself to burst, trying to be, or trying to appear to be something that she's not. And this is what always happens when we try to pretend that we're something that we're not. We try to puff ourselves up, as it were. And any time we do this, we cause ourselves embarrassment. We cause ourselves to burst. In God's providence, today's scripture reading at Mass was about this very topic. Jesus, our Lord, taught a parable. He said, when you go to a banquet, do not take a place at the table that's honorable. Because if the man who organized the banquet invited many different people, someone more honorable than you might arrive at the banquet, and the host of the banquet may have to go to you and say, would you please move down to a lower place at the table because someone greater has arrived. And that experience of trying to put yourself in a place of honor that you don't deserve, and then actually experiencing the opposite and being humiliated when you're trying to exalt yourself, is a good example of what happens to this vain old mother frog, trying to cause herself to appear as big as an ox, and ultimately causing herself to burst. So we can see that a moral of this fable may be, if you try to puff yourself up, you may burst. If you try to exalt yourself or cause yourself to appear greater than you actually are, you may end up destroying yourself. I think we can say that's the main moral lesson of this fable. And there's one more. Before the mother chooses to try and puff herself up one more time, the young frogs actually warn her and tell her not to do it, but she doesn't listen. And we see in this old mother frog an example of a foolish parent. A foolish parent is an embarrassment to his or her own children. And as we see in this fable, the children even have to correct their foolish parents. How ridiculous is it to see a situation where an adult has to be corrected by his own children? And yet this is very common. How many parents act as foolishly as their children? Think of the young frog that was crushed in the field. We can say, well, that frog was acting foolish, playing near the ox. And yet what do we find in the parent? The same foolishness. At the end of the story, both the young frog and the mother frog are dead, destroyed by their own foolishness, even after being warned by her own children not to do it. This is an example of the double dangers of foolish parenting. Not only do foolish adults destroy themselves, but they also destroy their children. And there are many families today where children are wiser and more virtuous than the parents in their own home. And this is obviously not God's will and is shameful. Aesop calls this old mother frog a vain old thing. So a number of lessons can be drawn by meditation from this fable. We can think that it's important to be careful and to not put yourself into dangerous situations like the young frogs did by playing in a dangerous place. We can compare that to playing in a road and not paying attention or keeping a watch out for cars. A second lesson is that if we try to puff ourselves up or appear to be something that we're not, we normally will cause ourselves more trouble, even self-destruction. So that's an important second moral lesson of this fable. And then thirdly, a warning against foolish parenting and the shamefulness of having parents that need to be corrected by their children, who not only leave their children to behave foolishly, but imitate the foolishness of their children. So these moral lessons can be drawn from this fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. And we've already discussed some of the ways in which this fable can help us in life. It can help us to be careful, to pay attention to our surroundings and not get ourselves injured by being careless. It teaches us not to try and puff ourselves up or make ourselves appear to be something that we're not. And thirdly, it teaches us to be responsible so that we don't have to suffer the shame of having someone younger or inferior to us have to correct us. And you can think of specific examples in your life where these things might be true. So I hope that's a helpful walk through Aesop's fable of the frog who wished to be as big as an ox. I'd love to know if you have any other thoughts as you read and reflect on this fable. Like I said, there are always a number of moral lessons that can be drawn. I've named 3 as I've reflected on this fable, but you may think of more, and if you do, please share them. I hope that's helpful. God bless your studies.